In this video, we're going to look at a yaw damper inoperative example from the textbook. So just like the depressurize, I'll read the question and then we'll have a quick chat about it. So the question says we're en route from Brisbane to Alice Springs using Tango 11, flight level 310 Mach 0.79. At time 0330 UTC, we're overhead Villol. Note the aircraft gross weight is 73.7 tonne, which includes 11,750 kilos of fuel. At time 3:55, so 25 minutes later, a yaw damper inoperative light comes on and we take the appropriate action, which would be to descend down to an appropriate altitude with the yaw damper failed. We have some route sector winds and temps there, and they're telling us to complete a flight plan from overhead Villol to landing at Alice Springs and determine the fuel on board at landing, which is why they've given us the fuel on board at our current position, Villol. So we're going to ask ourselves our two questions like any other flight plan, and then we'll get into it. So the first question being, what level are we going to fly at? Now in this scenario, we're flying from Villol out to a position where the yaw damper fails. So flying out to that point, it's going to be flight level 310 because that's given in the question. The level we're going to descend down to, or the appropriate level with the yaw damper inoperative, it depends whether you're flying east or west. So we're going from Brisbane to Alice Springs, so we're flying west. So if you look at your yaw damper inoperative tables at the altitudes we highlighted, we're looking for what's pink in my book, which is westerly track. We're flying at flight level 280. So the first question being what levels we're going to fly. We're going to fly at 310. And then we're going to be flying at 280 once we've descended down with the yaw damper inoperative. Second question is how we're going to break up the flight plan. So we talked about changing it for things like top of climb, top of descent, also some abnormal situations. So in this case, we do have an abnormal situation, and we also will have top of descent. So we're currently sitting over the top of Villol, over here. From the question, it's telling us we'll fly for 25 minutes and the yaw damper fails. So that would certainly be a point where we'd separate the flight plan. Now with yaw damper failures, we can't assume an instantaneous descent. We're not allowed to. So we have to plan our descent down to flight level 280. So we'll plan the descent here, and we'll plan to what I call bottom of descent. We'll then continue flying for a little bit to top of descent for Alice Springs, where we'll descend in to Alice with an approach. So that's the question 2 done. I'm going to write that on the flight plan and then we'll get into it. It's quite helpful a lot of the time to write the flight plan and also have just a graphical drawing of it. That way you just have a little bit more situational awareness of what it is you're actually planning. It can get a little bit confusing when you're just writing the segments. So at the start, until you're comfortable, feel free to draw up a little side view flight plan if it helps. So we've got our segments done. Just like the other flight plans, we're going to go left to right, top to bottom, filling as many boxes as we can. So we know we're going to be cruising out to the yaw damper failure point at 310. We'll be descending down to bottom of descent, cruising to top of descent at 280, and then descending into Alice Springs. We'll get the route sector winds and temp data. Now we're currently overhead Villol and we're flying to Alice Springs, so we're only going to be using one of these columns. For 310, the ISA deviation is +1. Not going to worry about ISA deviation for any descents, not even this descent from 310 to 280. Flying to top of descent is +1 as well. And we can fill in Mach numbers, so 0.79. And for 280 with the yaw damper failed, remember in the yaw damper inoperative table, we highlighted relevant Mach numbers for each of the flight levels. So flight level 280, we're flying at 0.74. Calculate the TASAs, 465 for 310. And I've calculated 441 with the yaw damper inop. Get the tracks from the ERC. And I'll get the winds from the route sector winds and temp. Now that I've got the winds and the tracks, I'll work out the wind components and then we'll calculate some ground speeds. Now that we've got up to ground speed, again, this is where we'll stop and reevaluate. Have a think, what are we going to do next? So the information we have for the first cruise sector we have a time. We have 25 minutes cruising time. Now, similar to the depressurized example, we have a time and we have a ground speed. That means we can calculate a distance. The distance we'll find is 172.5, and that was just getting the ETI, converting it to hours by dividing by 60, multiplying that by the ground speed. Now that we have a distance, we can find an estimated mid-zone weight. Now, it's important to remember this leg from VLOL to the yaw damper failure point is just normal ops. I'm cruising at 310.79. Nothing special is happening right now. It's not unusual for people to start using yaw damper failure SARs or the tables there. But right now, everything's fine. Nothing's broken. It's after that point the yaw damper fails. So right now, this is just another normal cruise leg. We'll find the estimated mid-zone weight using the same 9.5, considering we're at Mach 0.79. And we'll take into account the winds, all that stuff. So just another normal cruise leg. I'll get through it relatively quickly. I'll go ahead and find the fuel flow zone fuels. I won't talk about how to do that because by this stage you should be fairly comfortable just doing a normal cruise leg. Alright, the next line we're going to look at is the yaw damper fail to bottom of descent. So this is that leg here, an intermittent descent where we're descending from one level to another. Now, like we looked at in the intermittent descent video, I like to draw up a little table just to keep everything nice and neat. So I have 310 data, 280 data, therefore 310 down to 280 data. From the 727 manual, you'll find a descent from flight level 310 is 21 minutes, 660 kilos, and using the 70-ton column, which is the column we'd want to use, is if we descended straight from our current position down to the ground, we'd be landing the 70-ton column. We're going to find a distance of 107 air nautical miles. For flight level 280, you're going to have to interpolate between 29 and 27 for this. It's not that hard. You'll find 20.5 minutes, 635 kilos, and 98 air nautical miles. So therefore, the data from 310 down to 280 is going to be 0.5 of a minute, very quick descent, 25 kilos, and 9 air nautical miles, which we can fill in the bottom of descent row. Now, even though we're descending for only half a minute, 30 seconds, and traveling 9 miles, we're still going to work out what the ground distance is because there is quite a strong wind, 51 knot headwind. So I'll calculate the ground distance as 8.6 miles. The bottom of descent weight will be 71,895. Now the next row is the flight to top of descent. Unfortunately, we don't know the cruise distance to that. So similar to a normal flight plan, we're going to have to work out descent data first. Now, to work out roughly what weight we're going to be landing at, we need a distance to Alice Springs. We also need a distance from VLOL to Alice Springs. That way we can take out the distance to the yaw damper point, the distance on descent, both bottom of descent and into Alice Springs, and that's going to give us the cruise data to top of descent. So right now I'm going to go and add up all the distances from VLOL to Alice Springs. Once you've added that up, you'll find it would be 608 nautical miles, which I like writing up here at the very top of the descent column. So 608 miles, of which we've already covered roughly 180 miles. The remaining distance will be about 428 miles. At roughly 10 kilos per mile, it's going to be about 4 tonne. That's still going to put us in the 70-tonne column for our descent data. So I'm going to fill in descent data based off 70-tonne landing weight. Now the good thing is we've actually already worked out our descent data from 280 over here. And because it's interpolating, it would take a little bit more time to work it out again, but we've already worked it out, so we can just fill in the 280 data straight onto the flight plan from what we calculated before. That's 20.5 minutes, 635 kilos, and 98 air nautical miles. and I'll go ahead and work out the ground nautical miles. It should kind of just be an automatic thing. Whenever you work out an air distance, you straight away work out a ground distance, and that's 88.1 miles. Now the total distance being 608, of which 172.5 is cruise to the yaw damper failure point, 8.6 is the descent down to 280, and 88.1 is descent into Alice Springs. The remainder will be the cruise distance from bottom of descent to top of descent for Alice Springs. That's 338.8 nautical miles. From here we can work out the estimated mid-zone weight to top of descent. We have a distance, we have an SAR. Now this is the point where the yaw damper's failed, so we're going to be using an SAR of 9.2, but we'll also take into account wind. Right in over here, 0.02 multiplied by the wind component of 51. Because it's a headwind, we're going to add that onto 9.2, which is our yaw damper inoperative SAR. Multiply that by our distance of 338.8, divided by 2, and take it off our start zone weight. That'll give you an estimated mid-zone weight of 70 tonne. Go to the 727 manual on page 5-25. Go 70 tonne flight level 280, we'll get a fuel flow there. Now I don't usually write down the fuel flows on the flight plan, as you know. I like to save it in the memory. I'm going to write it down on this flight plan as well, just so you can compare your fuel figure. So the fuel flow I got was 4,077 kilos per hour. I'll go work out an ETI, which comes to 52.1. With the fuel flow in the ETI, we get a zone fuel of 3,541.8 kilos, which gives me an end zone weight of 68,353.2. Adding those together and dividing by 2 tells me my mid zone is still 70 tonnes, so that data is valid, and that data was from the yaw damper inoperative table. From here we'll take off descent data, gives us 67,718, and we'll take off an approach 467,318.2. Here's our landing weight, and here's the fuel we've used from VLOL to landing. Now the question asks, what fuel do we have on board at landing? It's funny, sometimes you'll do a flight plan, finish it, and then sit there and go, now what's the question actually asking? This is one of those exams where you get so involved in the process that you sit there and go, what am I even doing? Why am I doing this? What's the question? So in this question, it's asking what fuel on board at landing. So we've got the fuel on board at VLOL, 11,750 kilos. And all we have to do is just take off the fuel we used from VLOL to Alice Springs, including the approach. That's going to give us the fuel on board at landing. Now we can add up all these weights here in the zone fuel column. But you do run the risk of clicking the wrong button because you're adding a lot of different numbers there. Alternatively, what I prefer to do is you just take off the landing weight from the gross weight at the beginning of the flight, and that's going to give you the same fuel number as if you added all those up. So we had to start with 11,750 kilos, and we're going to take off all the fuel we use. So I'll take 73,700 kilos and subtract 67,318.2. That tells me we use 6,381.8 kilos from VLOL to landing. That tells me on board we have 5,368.2 kilos on board. It's on board at landing. And that's the question done. Again, you can see this is just another slight variation of a normal flight plan. Nothing to be too concerned about. It's basically just another flight plan with slightly different numbers. So hopefully that makes a bit more sense. Hopefully that helps you. Feel free to watch it again. Otherwise, we'll move on to some tail skid stuff.